I'm pleased to welcome you all to the webinar and to introduce you to today's presenter, Preetha, who has had many achievements throughout her very diverse and inspiring career. Preetha is an independent business consultant, senior business lecturer, journalist, editor, and children's author. She'll help you develop the courage to challenge yourself and your colleagues when necessary, deal with issues outside your comfort zone, and consider situations from different perspectives. Over to you, Preetha.
Oh, thank you very much for that wonderfully flattering introduction. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on authenticity and challenging. I'd first like to tell you something which we'd like to reiterate, which is the Institute of Leadership and Management identifies 5 separate dimensions of great leadership, which are ownership, achievement, collaboration, and vision, and they all have authenticity at its heart. Each of our 49 webinars focuses on one of the components of each dimension and highlights the essential learning that you need to assist you in your own personal leadership development. So I'm moving on to my next slide, which is just to tell you that the first dimensions of the leadership webinar series is authenticity. Authentic leaders are leaders who are recognized by their integrity and so inspire trust in others. They know and they live their values. They challenge themselves and also empower others to be the best they can be. The dimension of authenticity separates as well the practice of authentic leadership into 8 important components, each of which offer personal pathways for self-development and improve communication and conversations, which result in organizations that perform considerably better and are recognized as living their values, their mission, and their vision. So today's webinar will explore the dimension of authenticity and challenging. This is an integral part of being authentic as a leader, challenging yourself and others. So authentic leaders often challenge themselves and others. And just to kind of start us off into this, into exploring this topic, I have here a quote from Paul Pullman, who is the CEO of Unilever, who highlights something quite important. He says, the issues we face are so big and the targets are so challenging that we cannot do it alone. So there is a certain humility and a recognition that we need to invite other people in. We need to recognize here that human beings are neither invincible nor powerless. When we work together as a community or as a team, we have a whole lot of power. But by ourselves, we might not be able to, we might be specialists in one area, but not in everything else. So when he says again, when you look at any issue such as food or water scarcity, it is very clear that no individual institution, government, or company can provide the solution. And he's basically pointing out the fact that we need to work collectively together to get the best possible outcome. So we're now looking at a challenge, because this is very much at the heart of the webinar today, which is looking at challenging and authenticity. A challenge is commonly defined as something new and difficult, which requires great effort and determination on our part to overcome. And it can be a questioning of the truth or value of something or a situation, or the questioning of the authority of someone. In my career, I have come across many challenges. In our day-to-day, we often come across challenges. Sometimes even getting to work is a challenge for us because of traffic and so on. So you can imagine if something as simple as the process of transport to work is challenging, then when you are in a leadership position, or when you are navigating yourself through life at the workplace, you will come across several challenges. In my career, I came across something quite interesting once, where somebody made a decision on my behalf. A module leader made a decision on my behalf, and I was teaching a subject. And this was then communicated to the students, but I had actually no knowledge of this decision that had been made. And when I found out about it, I knew immediately that it was not something I agreed with, or something that I would have agreed with. And I decided to speak up, because I felt this is not my authentic voice. and I can't, communicate somebody else's decision to the students who are in my care. I take the duty of care very seriously. And this doesn't feel ethical or authentic to me, and this is not speaking my truth. So I need to speak up. So I spoke to the colleague in question, and I also spoke to my line manager, who then reiterated their view. And I made it clear that I was not comfortable and that I was not prepared to defend the situation, and that if I were asked, I would actually tell the truth, which, of course, was not a comfortable situation to be in. It didn't, unfortunately, on that occasion get completely resolved, but because my views were clear on it, there was some amount of reflection on my part and the part of those involved in it. And it made it slightly more harmonious for us to work together. So it is important, actually, that you question authority when you need to. And you also question the truth of a situation when you feel that it isn't, you are a part of it, but in some way you don't actually agree with it. Because if you keep silent, then these issues can build up over time, and that's not a healthy situation for anyone. Also, if you challenge a decision, a request, or an action, that itself sometimes is enough to get it noticed and for somebody else to take action on it. And while it might get reversed, it isn't always the case, of course. Sometimes somebody might actually stick by their decision. They might actually see a point of view, but still stick by their decision. And at such times, it is very important for you to handle things with a great deal of calmness. You need to take, in some ways, a step back, take the emotions out of the situation, sit down and logically build a case against it. Because when you go in with your emotions all heightened, you might often say the wrong thing, which doesn't actually go in your favor. But calmly building a case against it and pointing out the logic of the situation is only likely to at least get people listening to you, and listening is the first step. To make your case even stronger, you need to take certain steps on your own. And this may not actually involve other people. This might purely involve reflection on your own and an investigation of your own. The thing to remember is not everything that goes against us in life is actually coming from a place of any kind of personal vendetta or revenge. It's all too easy for us to think so sometimes, that someone holds a grudge against us and that's why they're doing it. But there could be reasoned thinking behind it. And I often need to remind myself of it. And there is often logic behind it, and the other person is seeing things differently. So understand their reasons. Be calm about it. It's, of course, easy for me to say be calm, and I myself am not calm all the time, despite years of lessons on it. But calmly understand the reasons behind their decision and then request action on what you're challenging. If the challenge is on ethical grounds, of course, that makes it harder, but you need to fully understand what are they. Sometimes you might actually be missing information, and something that looks on paper to be an unethical decision might not be an unethical decision. Think through all possible business repercussions and details. What could be the outcome of the situation, and what could be the outcome if you challenge it? You need to think of these things, but you also need to remember something. You are human, and so are the others involved in it. And perfection does not exist. Perfection is unhealthy. You do your best, and then you actually do exactly what that saying says. You do your best, and you leave the rest. Empathy is extremely important. And often, to those who are empathetic, often struggle with other people at the workplace because they can't understand why people don't share the same empathy as them. But empathy isn't always natural for everyone. Sometimes it needs to be taught and it needs to be learned, and people learn it over time. Some people are very empathetic naturally. What you need to do is look at who is involved in the situation. And when you speak to them, be aware of their personality and what is driving their decisions, and kind of adapt yourself and adapt your case to their personality a little bit, tailor it a little bit so it makes them less uncomfortable. Remaining calm, as I said earlier, is crucial. There is a famous Indian saint who says, "Remain calm, that is beneficial, sorrow will end." And I keep telling myself this, and 90% of the time it works with me, and another 10% it just isn't possible to follow it. I can't think rationally all of the time. It's not always easy, but this will help us all when you're dealing. If you are personally at this point listening to the webinar and dealing with a challenging situation, then bearing this advice in mind will actually help you remain calm, be logical in putting your case forward, and use non-threatening verbal and non-verbal language. Your body language is quite important. We will come to another point about mirroring the other person's body language in a second. But the verbal language you use in a situation, which is often, unfortunately, instinctive in us, might not be the best possible solution. I was in a meeting once where I used a word which was not professional. It wasn't an abusive word against anyone, but it was a swear word, because I was fed up of the situation. And my manager at the time pointed out that he was not happy with my use of the word. And while I thought it was a fairly harmless word, and it wasn't any one of the severe F words that I would ban in a classroom, I reflected on it and realized he was absolutely right. Using abusive verbal language, even if they are fairly harmless, acceptable everyday words, is not a professional thing to do and does not calm or help your situation or the other person. Also, be aware of your body language, and we will come to that in a second. Establish a rapport with the other person by identifying common interests and goals. You might once have been friends, but forgotten the friendship in the conflict or the challenge that has arisen. So try to go back to the friendship, maybe times when you did laugh with this person, or maybe if you don't know this person, try to find some common ground and try to like something about them, because disliking them intensely isn't going to help your case. And this is often something I need to remind myself of, because when you are annoyed about something, it's easy to not like the other person. But it will help you greatly if you find something to like about them. Subtly mirror the other person's body language. And this is what we spoke about earlier. Body language is integral when dealing with a challenge. If the other person in the meeting's got their hands in their lap, then it's a good idea for you also to put your hands in your lap. It will create, on a subconscious level, a feeling of empathy and a feeling of common ground, and it will send out a message to you as well as the other person. Yes, you yourself will subconsciously also start feeling this way, that you're not different, and that this person might be in a position of authority which is superior to you, or they may be a subordinate, but by mirroring their body language, you are basically saying we're both human. Ask non-leading questions. It's important that you ask questions, but you phrase them correctly. When you ask questions that sound defensive or ultra challenging, it puts other people on the defensive. They feel uncomfortable and tense, and you're not likely to get a good outcome. For example, instead of saying something like, how do you propose we manage this, and this, given the fact that we have so little to manage these things with and so few staff and resources, it might be better to say, where do you see the 5 of us in this department in a year from now? Because that makes it a non-threatening question, and it actually gets the other person reflecting on what you're truly asking and the situation at hand. And you need to actively listen to the answers that are provided, because You can't ask a question which you feel will help your case and then be distracted. You need to listen to exactly what they're saying. And when people say listen, we are in that situation actually talking about listening with yourself completely, immersing yourself in that situation, listening with your heart and your mind and your ears, and not just your ears, because it's only when you listen with all senses that you actually take in correctly what the other person's saying. Address any points of concern, because it's one thing for you to be concerned about the situation, but another thing as well to let go of any concerns the other person has, which might have affected their decision. When the conversation is over, it's always a really good idea to reiterate what you think has been agreed, because then you can return to this. And this is something which is very basic, but which we often forget. So hopefully we won't forget to do this in the future. A question being asked here is, why should you step out of your comfort zone, given you are happy with how your life is at present and you don't want to disturb it and you don't want to harm your career? You do need to step out of your comfort zone quite a lot in your career. And this is because life is never, rarely the same. Life is constantly changing. You need to evolve to deal with those changes. To maintain your integrity as well, you need to deal with situations which are sometimes uncomfortable for you. And building other people's trust in you is vital. Trust once lost is almost, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it is incredibly difficult to regain. And trust is vital because it brings about loyalty and a feeling of connection and empathy. Also, you need to tell yourself and demonstrate to yourself that you can deal with difficult situations. This will only bolster your own self-confidence and your belief that you can handle things that are not necessarily in your remit, as in hasn't come your way in the past, that you've not necessarily encountered at all, or which you feel is a bit uncomfortable and challenging. And also, challenging yourself is important because you might not realize you are set in your ways. You might not realize that your focus has become extremely narrow. And you may not know this because you're comfortable with where you are in life, but other people might see it differently. And also, you need to balance the amount of emotion and logic that is dominating the situation, because often emotions can make us see things differently. Logic can actually ground us. But you need both in life, because being purely analytical is cold and cynical, and life doesn't work like that. You need to take everything into account, intuition and rationality. And also, it might set you thinking of, when did you last push yourself like this? You might realize you actually enjoyed dealing with the challenge after all, that it wasn't as bad as you thought. They always say once you take the bull by the horns, you'll wonder why you didn't do it before. Be realistic about the amount of risks. You can't always deal with every situation, and you can't always give in to the demand of the majority. If you are in a situation of leadership, then you are in some ways responsible also for them. So be realistic about that. And have some kind of backup or safety net. Now, this can often take the form of another person who actually gives you support in the situation and holds your hand. There is a saying, of course, which we've all heard, which is, it's lonely at the top. And leaders often say that they find it difficult to find someone else to support them through their actions. This is where building networks with others is actually really important. You need to build trust among those you work with, and you need to build relationships. Um, some of my friendships, which are very supportive, actually came from the workplace, where I actually worked for people and they ended up being mentors with me, or I ended up just being their friend and supporting them. Friendships are important, and building trust in others is really crucial. And with that, we've come more or less to the end of our webinar. So we will at this point get ready for questions. Over to you, Jane and Arvin.
Thank you, Preetha. That was really, really enjoyable and really insightful. Particularly enjoyed all your examples that you talked about. I was just wondering, Preetha, how would you approach a colleague who maybe thinks that they have really good empathy skills, but actually is just pretty bad at it? Is there anything you can do to either help them identify that or to help them improve?
In the first instance, I would deal with it extremely gently by pointing out the importance of empathy in other ways. If, for example, your colleague is not a very empathetic person, but isn't aware of this, you have general chats with them about other things, and you draw their attention to empathetic individuals and compassionate situations. And or it might even be like a video clip which is inspiring. You forward this to them because nowadays people forward things on WhatsApp. And I don't know if you've noticed, Jane, but sometimes I receive something which I think, oh my God, I really needed to see this today. Is you forward them something which is an inspiring example, which makes them think. And that is actually sometimes more powerful than actually sitting somebody down and saying, you're doing this wrong. This is not working. In the first instance, always try to point it out gently to them. If you don't feel that's working, then be brave enough to be authentic to yourself, to bring in an example of where you feel they need to have been more empathetic, but be tactful. If this is not working at all and you feel you're working with this colleague and they're not empathetic, then you do need to have some kind of formal meeting and actually address it with them and give them also a full chance to explain themselves, because you might not be aware of the entire situation and you might not have all the facts to hand. I hope that answers it.
That's really, really helpful, and really, lots of detail there as well. If someone lacks self-confidence and there's an issue, how can they overcome their lack of self-confidence to deal with a situation and to challenge in that situation?
Okay, this is two things. One is that during the introduction, I wanted to actually say later that I'm also a qualified hypnotherapist, and what I specialize in is confidence, in confidence building in others. Also what I did say in my presentation earlier is sometimes you need to take the bull by the horns. When you do this, actually, you will find that you have a great deal more self-belief, and and you can actually deal with situations. This by itself will create a great deal of self-confidence for you. But if you feel you lack in confidence and you can't deal with situations, then one of the best things that we advise during hypnotherapy is to go back to a memory of when you actually handled something really well. Now, this could be a memory from school or from university or from the workplace where you actually handled yourself well. And remember the feeling of achievement and happiness you got in that situation. Just a 2-minute reflection, a 2-minute meditation on that will bring the feelings of confidence back into your life. And you will be able to push your confidence up.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
That is really helpful. In today's society, we're all under increasing amounts of time pressure, challenges. And we've had a comment that people in the with the lower time pressure challenge have a stronger hand. If you've got to challenge something that is immediate, imminent, are there tactics that you would suggest to deal with this, particularly if someone is not under as much pressure as you, or you're managing upwards?
Right. Okay. Even with time pressures, I think it won't hurt anyone to take a few minutes of reflection, because what happens is if we are under a lot of pressure and we react almost immediately to a situation, wires can get crossed, emotions can run high, and the best possible outcome might not actually ensue as a result. So under those circumstances, I would really advise practical tips like have a glass of water, go for a walk, just take 2 minutes to calm yourself down, and then actually directly deal with the person by either sending them an email or ringing them or meeting them face to face, and be gentle in your approach. Because I know in my early career and even now, sometimes when I go in full of fire, it doesn't really help. It doesn't matter if you are under deadline. The other person, the important thing to bear in mind there is that the other person is not under a deadline. So be gentle with them, but reiterate and state your case and explain this is really important. Please, can we just deal with the situation now? I would totally appreciate. And when you use the word appreciate and you're saying it sincerely, the other person actually gets the message more than saying, please do this now.
Thank you. I like the extra nuances that go into that. That's really helpful as well. If someone's working in the voluntary sector and maybe they're working with volunteers who are vulnerable for various reasons in their life, or in maybe due to mental health or whatever other reasons,
Yes.
how would you approach having a difficult conversation with someone who's volunteering with you?
Right. Having a conversation with someone who's volunteering with you under any situation under any circumstances is often quite challenging, but under the ones you have described, it can be particularly challenging. I don't know if you remember that in the webinar, I stressed the importance of actually remaining calm. The saying, remain calm, that is beneficial, sorrow will end. In the situation where you have to have a conversation with a volunteer or colleague under difficult circumstances, you need to be as calm and gentle as possible, but also you need to build slight common ground or reiterate that you have things in common. When you reiterate that you've got things in common, it actually relaxes the other person. I once had a very irate student burst into my office in one of my previous jobs. And this person was clearly distressed, really upset, and wanted to quit the course. So when this person came in, first I actually made them a cup of tea and gave them a glass of water, and then I actually asked them about something that they were wearing on their wrist, which was similar to what I had up on my desk. It was a saying that I had on my desk. We spoke about that, and they calmed down. And just creating that bond actually helped the situation greatly. When they left my office, they said they were not going to quit the course, they were going to continue, and they've successfully since completed their masters. So finding common ground is extremely important, and being gentle and calm is vital.
Thank you. And if you at the start of it, you talked about authority, and if you've got someone in a position of authority who won't accept your initial challenge to them, what different approaches might you use to engage them, particularly if they're senior to you?
If they're senior to you, it is a definite challenge, because you don't know whether challenging their authority is going to backfire on you or not. I would say first approach it gently as you can, but as you go along, if the problem recurs, like it has sometimes in my career, I found that problem has recurred when I've been gentle and pointed it out, and I've had to actually been firm. You need to remember that authority, whoever they are, is still human at the end of the day, and that at the saying, the truth will set you free, it doesn't come from anywhere. It's a true tried and tested method. You can, in life, sometimes you don't know whether something's going to backfire or not, but if you don't essentially agree with it and you've tried everything, the gentle approach and so on, then you need to be firm, and you might need to seek mediation from someone else who can help you deal with the situation. But you definitely need to deal with it, and you cannot let authority stop you.
Thank you, Preet, and thank you, Arwen, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar.